Welcome to r/Am I the Jerk, where Karen refuses to let her husband have a say in naming their baby. Am I the jerk for asking my wife when her sister will pay child support since she believes her sister has the right to name our kid? My wife and I, both in our early 30s, are expecting our first child after 5 years of marriage. My wife has always been close with her sister, and up until recently, I never felt like her sister was coming between us or that they were ganging up on me. We had talked about baby names before, and we agreed that we'd like to have 3 to 4 kids. Our communication had always been amazing, both before and after marriage. However, since my wife got pregnant, things have changed. She's decided she no longer likes any of the names we previously discussed and has taken the stance that, as the mom and the one carrying the baby, she gets the final say. She's been discussing names with her sister and letting her sister give suggestions, but she won't listen to a single name that I suggest. I told her that while I understand she might want to share her ideas or get inspiration from her sister, this is a decision that we as a couple should be making together. She brushed me off. I tried to explain that it hurt my feelings and made me feel like I was less important in this process than her sister. I reminded her that our daughter is ours together and we should be working as a team. Later, her sister told me to know my place and stay in my lane. I asked my wife if she'd consider attending couples counseling with me, but she dismissed the idea, asking why I was being so dramatic. I explained that I wanted to be part of the process of naming our daughter, that I wasn't trying to control the situation, but I wanted us to make the decision together. About a month ago, my wife finally told me that she feels her sister, being a woman and her closest friend, has every right to have a say in what her first niece will be named. She said it was important to her that her sister is included in this decision and that I don't have a right to insist on being part of it. At that point, I was so angry I didn't argue further. Instead, I calmed down, sought advice from a therapist, and tried to communicate better. I gently brought up the topic again over the next few weeks, and a few days ago, I asked her why she didn't want me to be part of this. I wondered if she was feeling pressured to include her sister, or if there was some other reason. Her response was that she feels she has the right to decide who helps name our baby, and she wanted her sister, not me. She said I should try to understand this and that it wasn't a big deal. Frustrated, I asked her when her sister would start paying child support since she had the right to name our baby and I didn't. I know I was being sarcastic, but by that point, I was angry. My wife called me ridiculous and accused me of being petty. She said it was crazy to suggest that her sister would pay child support because, obviously, our daughter is not her sister's kid. Then she called me a jerk for asking such a weird question and said I was being disrespectful towards her decisions and her sister's involvement. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Are you sure this is your kid? I see 10,000 red flags and would insist on a paternity test. You are not being treated as a father or a spouse. Your wife and her sister are total jerks here. Not the jerk at all. At this point, she's treating you like a donor, and it's not okay. Plus, with her sister telling you that you should stay in your lane, that's absolutely out of line, and she needs to be nipped in the bud. Somebody else mentioned divorce. Now, usually this isn't something I recommend because most problems are able to be resolved without going scorched earth. But unfortunately, this one is just the prelude to the rest of your married life with this woman. I snooped through my boyfriend's phone and got exactly what I deserved. I'm 34 female. My boyfriend, who's 36, and I have been together for 9 months. Before we got together, he was married for a few years, but he found out his wife had been having an affair with someone out of state. We started dating during his separation and after the divorce was finalized. Both of us were dealing with our own issues, but I thought we could work through them together. Recently, however, I became concerned that our relationship had become stagnant. I fell in love with him months ago, but was too scared to say it. There were no signs of our relationship moving forward or growing beyond our normal routine. We had met each other's friends and families, and he had been there for me through some tough personal situations. To outsiders, we seemed completely in love. But at the pace we were going, I feared I'd never hear him say those words. I couldn't understand what was holding us back. This past weekend, we stayed at a friend's lake house for a wedding. At one point, he went jet skiing with a friend while I stayed behind to start getting ready. His phone kept blowing up, and unfortunately, my past issues got the best of me, so I snooped. I found exactly what I deserved to find. He was texting his ex-wife. These weren't casual conversations. He was sending her messages like, "I'm thinking about you." And whenever she told him she missed him, he responded with, "I miss you too." I'm heartbroken. These were things that he had said to me. When I confronted him, he apologized, after first trying to deny everything. I decided to drive back home and skip the wedding. I was too upset and didn't want to ruin the event. When I asked him why he did it, he didn't really have an answer, only admitting that he knew it was wrong. However, he also told me that I crossed a line by going through his phone and said he wanted to take a break from us for a while. Now, I don't know what to feel now. I'm sad that this might be the end, but I'm angry that it's somehow being turned into my fault. Yes, I shouldn't have gone through his phone. It was a mistake. But now, instead of being left in the dark about the text between him and his ex-wife, I know the truth. What should I do? Is this the end? Or is there a way to salvage the relationship? Please help me. It's been a long time since I've been happy, and now I feel like I ruined it again. Update. Personally, I've always considered myself somewhat of a disappointment, and I'm sorry to let those of you down who wanted me to be strong. I tried this morning, but as expected, he's definitely done with me, and I'm still heartbroken. Some of you might wonder why or how I could still want this to work. Simply put, when you've been alone for so long, you'll try to hang on to anything that gives you even a glimpse of hope and happiness because going back to the alternative is so miserable. I'm sorry to disappoint you and let you all down. I just wanted to be happy. Make this break permanent. He's mad he got caught and is trying to turn it around on you. There's better out there. Take it as a sign. You dodged a bullet. He's clearly not over her or anywhere near ready to be in a relationship. Let him go for good. Yes, what he's doing is wrong. Personally, anyone separated or going through a divorce needs to be single for a while. It seems he rushed right into another relationship and wasn't fully done with his prior one. I'm usually in the minority here, but I don't think it was a mistake. If you hadn't looked, then you wouldn't know that he's having an emotional affair with his ex. He deserves the issues he's walking into. It's time for you to move on. My parents are tearing down my treehouse to install a hot tub and gazebo. So background on my childhood. My parents were in a business together and constantly fought. I was an only child, so I think I'm the only person in the world besides them who knew about it. To the outside world, we seemed like a very normal family. When I was 6, my grandpa asked me what I wanted most for my birthday. Even then, I knew I wanted to escape, so I said a treehouse. I helped my grandpa with every single nail in that place, and it became my literal sanctuary when there was utter chaos in my house. I was in there when it was 100 degrees outside. I was in there when it was below freezing. I painted it every year, I decorated it, I treated it like it was almost a religious retreat for me. I came home every summer from college and cleaned, painted, and even slept in it most of the time. I permanently moved out about a year ago, but I also had fantasies that I could someday introduce my own kids to the treehouse. In my ultimate pie-in-the-sky dreams, I thought about taking it apart board by board and reassembling it in my own yard. Yesterday, I got an email from my mom that almost as a footnote, she said very casually, "Oh, me and your father are tearing out that old oak tree with your ugly treehouse and finally putting in a gazebo with a hot tub. Aren't you excited for us?" I'm crushed over this. Apparently, it's coming down Saturday, and I just can't get home to do anything about it. I asked politely if they could try to please save the pieces, and my mom said, "We're hiring laborers. I just don't think they'll care enough to try." Thanks a lot, Mom. What can I do here? I'm so crushed. Is this just a part of growing up and being an adult that I have to deal with? Should I pay over $1,200 for a last-minute ticket tomorrow and try to save as much as I can? Update. So, end story is, I called my mom to please take several pictures of the treehouse for me from several angles and inside. She was so rude and dismissive and said something along the lines of, "Oh, Jenny, we don't have time for that, and you can't expect us to climb up into that piece of junk." I was heartbroken all over again because she was callous. I decided that the only way I was going to have any keepsakes was to fly home and either take pictures myself or save as much of the wood as I could. I bought a really expensive last-minute ticket home. After I had already paid for the ticket, I remembered that maybe my neighbor would be willing to take some pictures for me. They're an elderly couple, but they had almost been like surrogate grandparents. But Mr. Smith prided himself on being in great shape, so I figured it couldn't hurt to ask him for pictures just in case I didn't make it home in time. To say it was an odd conversation is an understatement. I'll just type it out to the best of my memory. Me. "Hi, Mrs. Smith. It's Jenny from next door. Are you guys in town by any chance?" Mrs. Smith. "Jenny, it's so good to hear from you. No, we're at our place in this other city. Is there something I can do for you? Is everything okay?" Me. "Well, not really. My parents are tearing down the oak tree with my..." Mrs. Smith. "What? They're doing what?" Me. "They're tearing down that oak tree with my treehouse." "No, they can't do that. That's our oak tree." Me. Well, I think either Friday or Saturday they're having people over to cut it down. Mrs. Smith. Jenny, I need to make some calls. I'm sorry, I need to let you go. I'll try to call you back. So I flew home early Friday morning. My parents had hired some laborers from Home Depot but weren't home. They were well underway tearing my treehouse down. I approached them and asked if I could pay them to set aside the boards and metal parts and not throw them in the dumpster that they had brought. They agreed, and I was able to save almost all of the wood in a very neat pile. I even tried to number everything, so if I ever do get to rebuild it someday, I know what goes together. It wasn't ideal, but I feel fortunate that I did get to save most everything. I'd say at maybe 6 p.m. my parents finally showed up and they were as mad as I've ever seen them. They weren't even happy to see me. What it turns out, the neighbors had their lawyer issue an injunction against tearing the tree down. I can't even begin to say how angry my parents were, and they didn't even really speak to me to tell me what was going on, so I called Mr. and Mrs. Smith back. It took until Saturday, but finally they called and told me that basically there had been a surveying mistake when my parents had built their house in the 80s, and the tree had actually been on the Smiths' property the whole time. They told me they've always had an uneasy peace with my parents over the error and had never minded having a treehouse in the tree, but chopping it down was crossing a major line. They said the tree gave them great shade in the summer mornings and they could not imagine tearing it down for any reason. They asked me what my parents' reasons were, and I told them about the gazebo, and he literally started laughing that my parents had the nerve to knowingly build a gazebo on their property. He said he had always planned on legally deeding the property over to my parents since it's only about an 11-foot error along the entire property. But since he thinks my parents purposely waited until he and Mrs. Smith were out of town to rip down the tree, he wasn't in any mood to do them favors. Saturday was so awkward, and I spent the night at a friend's house from high school. This morning, my dad said he wanted my crap off his property, so I called the Smiths back, and they said they don't mind if I stored my wood in their barn as long as I need to. My parents went to church, and I plan on leaving without saying goodbye. I had some memorabilia boxes in the attic. I'm taking them to a friend's house, and she's going to ship them to me so that there's nothing left in the house for my parents to take their anger out on. I don't know how this will affect our relationship, but the reality is we haven't had much of one for a long time. I don't have any attachment to my childhood home anymore, so at least in the near term, there's nothing for me to really go home to. Are my parents being overboard regarding my boyfriend's manners? My boyfriend and I have been dating for 1 year. I think he's an amazing, smart, kind, and respectful person. I can tell he cares a lot about me and loves me deeply. Personally, I feel that he takes great care of me, is a gentleman, and is always kind and patient with me, even when we argue. However, there have been a couple of instances, specifically in front of my family, where, in their eyes, he displayed some bad manners. I'll go ahead and list them. When we visited my grandparents in Europe, he was carrying flowers to give to my grandma as a thank you for having us. In the moment, he forgot to come back to the car and help my dad and uncle with the suitcases. My dad called him entitled and disrespectful, saying he doesn't feel like he has to help. Honestly, it was a genuine mistake because he was focused on surprising my grandma with the flowers and just forgot. When we were in another country beforehand, he carried everything, leaving me with just a backpack and travel suitcase while he carried the heavier ones. I brought up the situation to him and he let me know that it will never happen again, and he truly apologized for it. The second time he came over to my house, he's only been to my house twice because of the distance, we were sitting in my living room. He was sitting on this huge round chair couch thing, which is very wide and allows you to extend your legs on it. He did that, but his feet were leaning against the side of the table. We were talking and watching TV, so I didn't notice. My mom came into the living room, saw it, and asked him to get his feet off. My mom later told me she thought he had no manners and was entitled. However, my boyfriend immediately apologized and felt horrible. He later told me how bad he felt about the whole situation and genuinely did not mean to do that. He didn't even realize what he was doing at the moment. He apologized to me countless times because he didn't want to embarrass me and assured me that it would never happen again. This one is a little embarrassing to mention, but when we were visiting his family in Europe, I was FaceTiming my mom to say hi. He was sitting at the hotel desk and I was sitting on the bed. He accidentally let one rip and my mom heard it. When I came home, she told me that was extremely inappropriate and again said he had no manners. Meanwhile, the second it happened, he turned around and whispered, "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I thought it would be a quiet one." When the call ended, he apologized a million times. He felt awful because my mom heard it, but he had an upset stomach, so I understood. He didn't realize it would be so loud. I mean, he's human. Is this seriously the end of the world though? It's not like he does it constantly around my family, That would be concerning. Lastly, when he came over to my house both times after eating dinner, if there were any leftovers, he would ask if anyone was going to eat them. When we all said no, he would finish what was left. In my mom's eyes, he was eating too much and being inconsiderate, even though it was really a compliment to her cooking. I brought this up to him and he felt bad about it. He didn't realize it was a problem. He said my mom's cooking was just really good and he enjoyed it a lot. He didn't mean to come off as inconsiderate and told me that next time he comes over, he'll be more mindful. So the question is, are my parents going overboard by saying he has no manners and is disrespectful? In all 4 situations I mentioned, we talked about it afterward. He apologized and he understood what he did wrong. He promised it would never happen again, and since then it hasn't, even when it's just the 2 of us. Despite these incidents, he's genuinely a respectful and well-mannered person. He always carries everything for me, doesn't let me open a single door, and surprises me randomly with flowers. When we had extra untouched food from a restaurant in New York City, he gave it to a homeless person so they could eat. Whenever he came over to my apartment back in college, he never put his feet on the table. The chair at my house just led to a slip-up. There have been plenty of times I FaceTime my mom with him in the background, and it never happened again. I could go on with the list. In short, he is a good and respectful man who's had a few slip-ups, but he's recognized them and learned from them so they won't happen again. Nothing that he did is actually disrespectful. Your family seems like they want to hate him and are just looking for things to complain about. Your family sounds like judgmental jerks. The only person who should be concerned about his lack of manners is the person dating him. I kind of feel like no guy would be good enough in their eyes unless it was someone they handpicked for you. Your parents sound like snobs. Please stop bringing these things up to your boyfriend. You say they're small things and he's a good guy, yet every time your parents bring up his rudeness, you immediately turn to him and make him feel bad by mentioning them. Your parents are terrible. Stop passing on the terrible. Am I the jerk for telling my mother-in-law she's making a huge deal out of virtue names when she really doesn't need to? My mother-in-law has a really weird hatred for virtue names, and in recent years, she's become quite vocal about it. A lot of her issues seem to revolve around the idea that virtue names set high expectations for kids or lead to them being compared to their names. I, 29 female, have a virtue name, Serenity. My sister-in-law, who's 25, my husband's younger sister, and her husband are strongly considering a virtue name for their daughter, who is now due in a few weeks. Mother-in-law has been so outspoken recently against virtue names that sister-in-law asked me how I felt growing up with a name like Serenity and whether I felt any pressure to live up to it. I told her I always thought my name was really pretty and I never felt like I was expected to live up to it. In fact, until I was about 12, I was pretty wild as a kid and nobody ever threw it in my face that I wasn't living up to my name or that it didn't suit me. I explained that my name seemed pretty normal even though I wasn't raised in a particularly religious town. Sister-in-law then mentioned that mother-in-law's strong opinions about virtue names were starting to get to her. I pointed out that mother-in-law loves the name Grace, which is also a virtue name. Sister-in-law, who had forgotten that, laughed, and it reassured her. She thanked me for the talk, and I told her that she could come to me again if she needed to, and that she and her husband should just follow their hearts when choosing a name. This past Saturday, we were at mother-in-law and father-in-law's house, and mother-in-law was ranting at sister-in-law again about virtue names, telling her she better not seriously consider one for her grandchild. Sister-in-law stood up for herself and said that a virtue name was in their top 3 choices, so mother-in-law needed to stop talking negatively about them because she didn't want her daughter to hear that kind of talk. At this point, mother-in-law pulled me into the conversation, expecting me to side with her. I told her she was making a huge deal out of virtue names for no reason. I explained that virtue names are not a big deal, and that many of them, including mine, are very common and popular these days. She argued that having a virtue name comes with a lot of judgmental comments, and that I, of all people, should understand that. My husband jumped in, telling her that she was the one being judgmental about it. He reminded her that she has been rude, repeatedly ranting about virtue names in front of me, knowing I have one of those names she claims to dislike. He told her that at this point, nobody cared about her opinion on the subject. Mother-in-law ignored him and asked if I was really okay with letting her granddaughter go through life being compared to her name. Both my husband and sister-in-law told her to let it go, but she persisted, saying she expected me to be more understanding and less dismissive of her genuine concerns. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. Mother-in-law needs to show some grace and charity and prudence in dealing with her daughter-in-law, or else she won't have any hope that the grandchild will be part of her life and she'll miss out on the joy and felicity that would bring to her. If she changes her mind and lets her destiny include learning to live in harmony with her daughter-in-law, maybe the daughter-in-law will show her some mercy. Am I the jerk for refusing to attend my sister's child-free wedding after she asked me not to bring my baby? I'm 34, female. My sister, who's 29, is getting married in 3 months. She's having a child-free wedding, which I totally respect. My husband, who's 35, and I have a 3-month-old baby. When my sister first told us about the child-free situation, I assumed there would be some flexibility for immediate family, especially newborns who can't be left alone. I talked to my sister and asked if we could bring our baby to the ceremony, explaining that I'm naturally feeding and we don't feel comfortable leaving our baby with someone for an entire day. We have to fly to the town where she's getting married, and we don't know anyone there, so we would either have to leave the baby with a stranger or leave the baby back home with someone we know for a long period of time. I'm quite anxious about being away from our newborn for too long, which my sister knows. To my surprise, my sister was adamant that no kids, including our baby, would be allowed at the wedding. She said it wouldn't be fair to make an exception for us when other guests are also not allowed to bring their kids. I asked if we could at least bring the baby for the ceremony and leave afterward, but she said no, explaining she wants a strict, no kids atmosphere the entire day. I told her that if our baby couldn't come, we'd likely skip the wedding because it's too hard to leave our newborn for such a long stretch of time. We thought about the idea of just having my husband attend, but that also seemed a bit strange. I also don't want to just leave the baby with my husband and go by myself. My sister got very upset with me, saying it's her special day and that she feels like I'm putting our baby above her wedding. She even hinted that I should figure out how to detach from the baby for just a few days and that we should understand how important this event is for her. Maybe I'm being unreasonable for not being willing to leave my baby behind, but I just feel like I should be there for my baby at all times. Plus, I know how anxious I'm going to feel that entire day. My sister's argument is that it's her wedding and her rules, and while I respect that, I also think she should be more understanding of our situation. Am I really the jerk for refusing to attend her wedding if I can't bring my baby? After 5 million of these stories, it's still difficult to understand why those holding child-free weddings get upset when people with kids can't or won't come to your precious wedding. It's equally difficult to understand why those with kids keep wanting exceptions for their rugrats. Not the jerk for not going, not the jerk for wanting a child-free wedding. There, I hope that clears it up for future posters. My Karen sister loses it when I tell her I don't want kids, I want money. My sister has a 5-month-old baby. Her and her boyfriend are not struggling financially, but their standard of living has very much decreased since giving birth. They can afford the necessities, but they can't go on vacation, can't go out to eat, and can't afford a babysitter. They also just moved into a cheaper apartment. My mom has been asking my sister and the baby to move in with her so that they can save money. My sister said no. For more context, my sister's boyfriend makes a little less than minimum wage. He only works part-time at a restaurant to focus on creating his music. When my sister announced they were trying for a baby, my mom was really worried, and she's still worried, about their financial situation. My sister is the primary income source for their household, and my mom has been giving them some money every month. I make a little more than my sister, but I don't have kids. So last night, all of us came together for dinner. My sister kept asking me when I'm going to have kids, and I said I don't plan on having any. She said I'll change my mind. I'm almost 30. I said I probably won't, and she kept pressing me on why. I finally just said, I don't want kids, I want money, and she got really quiet. When dinner was over, she left a voicemail to my mom crying about how I attacked her, and my mom is now mad at me. My mom wants me to apologize to my sister. To be clear, I do think my sister is in a nightmare situation, but I would have said I wanted money even if she didn't have a baby. I've always thought I'm not meant for parenthood, and I'd rather just be the cool, fun aunt that travels a lot and buys big presents for my nieces and nephews. I didn't mean to insult her, and I've never once commented on her financials or relationship because it's not my place. Am I the jerk, and should I apologize? Not the jerk. This is one of those things where context matters. If you were sitting at dinner and just randomly blurted out, I don't want kids, I want money, that would be a jerk thing to say to your sister. But when she starts asking when you're gonna have kids, and especially when she refused to drop it, she's asking for a response like this. She asked and you answered. She doesn't like your answer. That's on her for pressing you for one in the first place. You didn't attack her. You upset her by being honest, and that's not your fault. My husband made our nanny quit. I, 29 female, am married to my husband, who's 34, and we have a nanny who's 21. We hired our nanny over a year ago when I was pregnant with our daughter, while I had a toddler who was 2 at the time, who's now 4, and I couldn't do much work, and my husband couldn't be with me all the time due to his work. She's amazing with our girls. She has helped me so much during the last few months of my pregnancy and especially postpartum. None of my friends are pregnant yet, so they couldn't always help me, and I don't have mom, nor am I close with my mother-in-law. I didn't have anyone to confide in like that. Our nanny has so much experience and was so amazing to me. She made me amazing soups and stews from her culture that were made to help pregnant women. It was amazing. She would make my toddler have quiet time, which was even more amazing. She's always on time, she's very clean, an amazing cook, really fun with the girls, and a good teacher as well. Our nanny and my husband only met once, and that was during our Zoom meeting, and they have never met after that. Since she gets here after my husband leaves and leaves before he comes back, they've never crossed paths before. 3 weeks ago, me and husband got really sick, so my husband stayed home from work. Due to how sick I was, I forgot to relay this information to our nanny. Our baby has been extremely clingy the past few months and will cry if left alone. I usually bring her in the bathroom with me, but the bathroom downstairs is much smaller, so our nanny can't do that as comfortably. She decided to just start using the bathroom with the door cracked open and would give our baby a toy outside so she's not tempted to come in but can still see her. I'm aware of this and I'm fine with it since it's only us girls at home. While my husband was home, unbeknownst to her, she went to use the bathroom with the door open and my husband saw her. She completely freaked out and apologized profusely. I had no issue and apologized to her that I forgot to let her know my husband was home. Everything was fine, but I sensed she was extremely uncomfortable, which I kept apologizing for. The next few days, my husband started going to work late and coming home early, to which there would be more interactions between him and the nanny. When I hired our nanny, one of the things she told me was that she wasn't comfortable with adult men in the house, which was not a problem since our arrangement didn't allow it. When he would see her, he kept trying to make personal conversations with our nanny redirected to our girls. Last week, she spoke with me and reminded me of the agreement we had, which was no adult men in the house and that she was uncomfortable. I completely understood where she was coming from. I spoke with my husband and he apologized to her and me. The next day he went to work normal, then 2 days later he told me he had to work from home since his office is getting worked on. We talked to our nanny and my husband told us that he would stay upstairs the whole time, which worked for the rest of the week. Monday, he accidentally forgot his coffee and went to get it while our nanny was there. He was asking her personal questions. He asked her how her weekend was, which she responded, good, and then he had the nerve to ask her if she saw her boyfriend. She responded no and that she didn't have one. He went on to ask her what type of men she was into. I was downstairs quickly to stop it. I apologized to our nanny. When we got upstairs, I yelled at him for talking to her like that and reminded him what he agreed to and that he was to stay away from her. I noticed he was monitoring the nanny cam a lot and he told me that he was just checking in on the girls. Yesterday, I had a really bad stomach ache because I'm lactose intolerant and my husband accidentally put whole milk in both of our coffees. I asked him to go in the day with the nanny and lock up the door after that. Unbeknownst to me, he started asking her what type of men she was into and was telling her how he's dated black women before and is into them. Our nanny is black and I'm not. He also jokingly grabbed her shoulders to pick her up and move her aside to get to the fridge. Why didn't he just say excuse me is beyond me right now. Last night, our nanny tried calling me, but I was sleeping because I took some medicine for my stomach. I woke up today to see a text from her that she was quitting because she didn't feel comfortable coming to the house anymore. I texted and called her and she hasn't picked up. I'm beyond angry at my husband and I took some time to calm down, but really I can't. I don't think I can replace her and truly I don't want to. I don't want to start this all over again. We know each other so well. We have inside jokes. We have memories that I can't recreate. She is someone I have felt comfortable enough to confide in with everything. She's been with me throughout special moments with the kids and even for me. I'm not upset with her at all and completely understand why she's shaken up by all of this, so I've accepted giving her some space. I just really wasn't prepared for this. Edit. First, for people saying our nanny is wrong because my husband lives here and should be comfortable. She came highly recommended from a woman from our church and we wanted her. She gave us her requirements and one of them was that she's uncomfortable working with adult men in the house. We agreed, including my husband. Whenever he has finished work early, he stops by somewhere else to work or hang out until Nanny leaves. Nanny isn't mentally ill for not wanting men in the house. She's explained to me that she's had issues with husbands making weird advances or sometimes wives accusing her of things, so to avoid problems, she just doesn't want them in the house. Second, I still have a nanny because I'm now trying to work. Third, I do not like my husband, nor do I condone his behavior. We have had issues since he became useless to our family. My needs weren't grave when I was pregnant. I just needed certain foods, medicine, and help with showers, but he wouldn't help with anything, and this was with our first kid. And the second one, we got a nanny. I've thought about divorce, but I kind of need his money. If it was just me, I would have divorced him already, but I have kids, so I'm aware of what he was trying to do. I have talked to and scolded him. Fourth, I usually make our coffees, but he made them yesterday because baby kept me up all night and he was home. I put the drink in glass containers with labels that it would be easy to mix up. It also tasted the same. Update. I didn't marry my husband for the money. We dated when I was in college and then he proposed. We loved each other a lot and everything was great in our marriage. When I got pregnant with our first, it was good. He was helpful. Then somewhere along the line, he just started becoming distant. I always handled everything in the house since I didn't work, but even in the third trimester, he refused to help and would always say he's tired, but would play basketball outside or video games. He started working later and it caused some problems. We got couples counseling and it fixed some things and we were pretty good. Hence the second kid happened. The second pregnancy was really bad. I mean, at my first trimester, I was in and out of the hospital, and when at home, walking or standing was really hard, so I would need help getting to the shower, and things like that, or my medication, which he didn't help with and avoided me. So there would be days where our daughter would only eat leftover snacks from our room because I couldn't move. If you asked him where the cleaning supplies are in the house, he wouldn't know because he's never cleaned it before. And he would buy food on the way home and eat, and then when he'd get home, he'd say that he forgot and offer to go get some, knowing that where we live, it would have to be a 20-minute drive, and by the time he'll get home, the baby would already be sleeping. People who said our nanny was being prioritized over my husband is ridiculous. My husband isn't trapped in the house, and we didn't move our lives around the nanny. The hour she's here is when my husband is at work. He chose to avoid seeing her, and that's why if he finished early, he wouldn't come home. What a jerk your husband is. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.